What else do we have? Did you want to mention anything about Pokemon? I know we said last week. I think they're the fastest selling. Scarlet and Violet, fastest in the series. Did you have anything to add for your
Uh,
Pokemon experience?
I don't know. It's fine. It's Pokemon. Performance is pretty jank still. They got patched I think like a week ago or something like that, or maybe a few days ago. But like, um, I had this problem. And this I think a lot of people are having this problem where the longer you play the game,
The
the
longer you
worse it
play,
the worse it runs. So like, there's like as if there's like a memory leak or something in the game. So like,
what
the
the
more hours you
heck?
put into the game, like the performance gets worse and worse and worse. It gets
So
slower and that kind
it's
of thing.
compounding. Like you said, a
Yeah.
memory leak. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What
So
the heck?
what I did is like I just like restarted. I just closed the game. I saved, reclosed, I closed the game and booted up. And then when I went back into the game, it was like running much smoother. I was like, that's hilarious. That's so funny.
I mean,
Um,
it's it is kind of weird because like I've seen comments on like threads that some people are like, this game is buggy as heck. And then other people, like, right below that will say, like, I haven't had any issues with the game. I don't know if some fans just don't know what the issues look like or they're just denying them or because the game does run fine. I mean, there are weird things here and there. Like, I was watching your stream and, like, the way these Pokemon were running was just, I don't know
oh,
if that was
are
by
you talking about
design.
the Sunflora challenge where I had
Yeah,
to like find them?
yeah, that was, I don't know if
I
that,
hated that.
I don't know
That
what
was
that
so
was.
dumb.
It hurt my eyes, but it was there.
Yeah, so there's a part in the game, it's like the second gym. Well, it's technically you can do any gym you want in any order, but there's a gym where you need to hide and seek with some flora. You have to find them, and then when you find them, they'll just follow you throughout the town.
Hmm.
And yeah, I did this thing on stream. Well, I was like looking back at myself. So I was looking at my character run at a normal, smooth looking 30 frames per second. But the Sunflower running behind me were noticeably running at what appeared to be like a lower frame rate.
But they
Um,
were running smoothly though.
which is technically not true, I think, because the game is running at like let's say 30 frames per second, but just their animation cycle was called, so they had less frames of their animation, so it would hold a certain frame for much longer. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense. So their animation looked way choppier than my character's animation, which looked normal. And the game
I'm
does it.
trying to
So this
find it,
happens
but
all over Pokemon. Like it's prominent in the entire game where animations for objects that are still very plainly in view will look choppy. Just because they're removing a lot of the animation cycles, I guess to save like on performance. So I went into a town last time I was streaming, which has a giant. Oh, this is the same town I think, but that's the Sunflower thing. But there's a windmill, a big windmill in the town, right?
okay, okay.
And windmills move predictably like windmills. So those windmill blades will just rotate normally, right?
Right,
When
right.
I like first went into the town, the windmill was animating like not smoothly, and I thought it was a giant clock. Because of like, yeah, because the way that like a second hand would tick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how that windmill was moving, and I was like, "Oh, it's a clock." And I look, and I'm like, "Wait, why is like there's like four hands on that clock?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a windmill. Holy shit!" Yeah, and then like this, the closer you get to the windmill, then the smoother it gets, and once you get like right under it, then it's actually moving like a proper windmill. But you can
I kind
replicate this. Yeah, you can
Oh my
easily replicate this
goodness.
just like by looking at it and then pulling away and then being like, "That's." You can just noticeably see animations just drop off. Like NPCs will just do it, so their walk cycle gets weird, so they're like moving like robots. It's just
It's like a
yeah,
lot of little stuff that honestly, like, if you don't focus on the outside of your character,
yep.
like if you just hone on your character, I feel like those issues would kind of be very, like, they're very, very minute, right? Like it's stuff. It's kind of like things maybe like, oh, I like 30 FPS games. Well, I notice when they're not running. I play on 60 FPS or 120. Like that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Mm.
Like for some people, they just will never notice it, even though it's happening every other second, kind of thing. But when you look at your actual character and stuff, like things are moving. It's not
Yeah,
HD. It's just
yeah.
480p. That's all. It's
My
480p. It's not 1080.
the biggest problem I think that most people have isn't the fact that the game only runs at 30 frames. I don't
Hmm.
think that's a problem for most people. A lot of games run at 30 frames. Like I mentioned before, like FF7 remake for me on PS4 was 30 frames per second. And it is noticeable, like when you, especially jumping straight from like another game that's 60 or higher, right?
Right, right.
But eventually, like I was able to like fully really enjoy FF7 remake, and you just kind of like you get used to it as you like the more hours you put
Oh
into it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
The problem with Pokemon is that it's like inconsistent, I think is the main word here. So like
Okay.
you animate fine
Yeah, yeah.
at a
You're
smooth like 30 frames per second,
exactly.
but when other characters and Pokemon and objects in the field like don't animate as smoothly, it's really noticeable, which is I
Yeah.
think the biggest gripe that people have.
And so I mean you've played this and Arceus earlier this year. Are they around, are they similar? I mean like here's the thing. I don't want to harp on the this part because I think a lot of people have kind of harped on it. But the general consensus of people that I've talked to who have finished the game have all
Yeah.
had a blast playing it. And I mean have had an awesome
Like
time.
Pokemon, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, for
Scarlet, right?
Scarlet and
Scarlet,
Violet.
right?
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
had a blast playing it and
Yeah, the game
you
is
know.
fun. I mean, a lot of people have a laundry list of issues they have with the game, technical issues they have with the game, and I guess some gameplay. I mean, some people will not agree with all the gameplay decisions, right?
Right, right.
But my final word is that the game is fun. It is a very fun Pokemon game, and I think it's a pretty good start to a new generation of Pokemon games. There's a lot of new things in this that I do hope they carry over to
Mhm.
newer games. The first attempt of a true open world is a really good first attempt, I would say.
Right.
The idea of having your Pokemon roam, like having your Pokemon auto battle, is really cool. You can just chuck your lead Pokemon out there, and he'll just like run around and just kill everything in sight. Like, it makes it really easy leveling, really casual leveling. You don't have to get
Mhm.
into every single battle. And yeah, there's just the idea that like, oh, you can do the gym. You can do the gyms in any order you want. There's a kind of a recommended order, but you can technically do whatever you want. They have the Titan Pokemon. You can just do those if you want to do those. You know what I mean?
Right, right. I mean, there's a
Um,
lot more freedom of choice and
I do like that TMs are craftable. Like it is kind of cool to be like, oh, I have to get Pokemon materials. I gotta craft this stuff.
mm,
It sounds kind of dumb, but it is like I guess it is kind of fun, and it gives you reason to go and actually fight Pokemon in the field because you got to get that material.
and
Uh,
that's I mean like a lot of these like change is good in this sense
yeah.
just because it seems like it was done for the most part correctly and I will say for performance stuff I was actually very curious. I don't know if this is something that Nintendo will do or whoever does this but um for Switch 2, do you think that this game will eventually get a remake version? Like Switch
Oh,
3, what down the line? Because I'm like, how are they gonna keep remaking these Pokemon games?
like if they do a third version, you mean?
If they do a third version of this
They haven't
game.
done. That's the thing. That's a good question. I don't know because they haven't done one in a long time. I know for a while the trend was, for example, like Gold, Silver, Crystal, Ruby, Sapphire. Sorry, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, right?
Right, right.
But they don't do those anymore. I mean, people have been expecting for a long time that they would continue to do those. But with Black and White, they did Black 2, White 2. For XY, they did nothing actually.
Yeah, there's no Z or anything. It's just X and
Yeah, and then
Y.
for Sun Moon, they did Ultra Sun, Ultra
Ultra
Moon, which
Sun
are
Moon, yeah.
yeah, and then for Sword Shield, they just put out DLC.
DLC.
Honestly, so they haven't done a third version in a long time. So if they do a new Switch console, I actually don't think Game Freak will be like, here's Pokemon.
The definitive edition like Xenoblade
I
Chronicles.
like I don't know what color it would be, but here's like another Scarlet Violet thing. They might just do the same thing. They might just do like an Ultra kind of thing, like
An
Ultra
alternate.
what's it called, Ultra Violet, Ultra Scarlet, or something like that, right?
Okay. I feel like this game is going to get its, if say like Ultra or whatever, it will have like the definitive edition version of it. I just feel like that's what's gonna happen. So like if you want to wait for it to get patched or whatever, I don't think they're gonna patch it to the extent to fix everything. I just
Well,
feel
I
like
don't.
there's going to be an actual
Well,
next
I mean,
version of
a
this game.
definitive version has never happened before. They've always been marketed as just alternate versions. So, like, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon technically wasn't, I think, meant to replace Sun and Moon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, the story changed, actually,
Okay.
slightly. I mean, I guess you could argue that the last time they did a definitive, and I guess they have. You could argue that Emerald was the definitive version, and you could argue that Platinum was the definitive version of those gens, right?
Right, right.
And I guess I would agree with you, if you put it that way, because they did add a bunch of features and they kind of unified the storylines
Hmm.
because they're not split games anymore.
Hmm.
But they just haven't done it in a while. Like Black 2, White 2 is Black 2, White 2. Like they're not. It's not definitive Black. It's the sequel to Black.
I think the only reason that I'm personally thinking of this is just due to a lot of the technical stuff with this, and I'm even like I don't even know what like Breath of the Wild 2 what that's gonna look like because we're hitting this point where the Switch is honestly, we see it with Bayonetta 3, we saw it with this game, and like I think there's one. What was the other game before that? Oh, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is like it's done. Like the hardware
You think it's maxed
is
out?
it's either it's maxed out or they're trying to find some crazy tricks to unmax it because they're all having this be part of their reviews, and like issues with the games, even though the games themselves are fun and deep and wonderful. I have to say, if they do put out a new Switch, or when they put out, it's not if they do, when they do, it would be nice if maybe, say if there's not a definitive version of this, that if anything, for whatever reason, it just goes through and corrects, like it runs at a better frame rate. It does some sort of thing to enhance this game, right? Something, I don't know. But if it's a fundamental program thing, then it's
Yeah.
not going to do anything.
I think there's a discussion here about how important technical performance is to a video game, to the
Yeah.
overall experience.
Hmm.
Because like,
I mean, we had this and we have something like Cyberpunk.
sure, yeah. I
Right.
mean, you can argue like Bayonetta 3, for example, like
Hmm.
which also I think has probably issues with frame pacing and stuttering and low frame rates and that kind of thing, right?
Right. Originally
Uh,
supposed to be an open world game, actually.
you can argue that like I don't know, like this how important is technical performance to your overall enjoyment of a video game and how good that video game is. Because like I think to some degree like it shouldn't matter too much. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like I like games to run really well and look really good, and it's part of the reason why I like playing on PC because you have a lot more headroom, right, to
Exactly.
get that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
performance. That's why I like PC gaming for sure. But like I think for me personally, like if something like let's say textures look shitty. So I mean, let's talk about that famous door from FF7 remake, right? That shitty door that looks really bad, right?
Yeah.
We can talk about that, but I at no point, and not just the door, but a lot of other textures in that game. At no point was I like, "Whoa, this game fucking sucks." That door ruined it for me. Like I never once thought that, right?
Yeah.
But I did think like, wow, that actually is a pretty shitty door. But I didn't like take me out of the game entirely. Like I can't get invested in this video game anymore, right?
No, no.
But I think, and I'd actually be willing to forgive like some frame pacing problems, some,
Hmm.
but not like. But I think if it was to the point where they were excessive and like really, really, really like distracting, not just distracting, but like detrimental to my experience, then I would be like, I can't play this game because of these.
Right.
But when it comes to like textures, I could be like, oh, the game just looks shitty. That's how I felt
Textures
about Arceus.
textures I don't mind as much. It's more like
Yeah,
the little stuttering, the stuff that usually will get to me a little bit. Um
yeah,
I think I mind it when hardware kind of interferes with maybe what the developers want to do. In this case, I don't think it did because they accomplished their goal. They made an open world game. They added the systems they wanted to add. And in the case of like maybe Bayonetta, it was like they wanted to do an open world, but they couldn't due to the hardware limitations. So that game actually had to go undergo a complete change. Um,
right. So you're saying like it's bad that Bayonetta had to become a different game, right?
if that's if that's how the developers, if that their vision was they wanted it this
Right.
way, but the hardware limitations forced them to make it another way. Yeah, I think that we were kind of not, I don't want to say denied, but that's now like the what if Bayonetta, right? What
Sure,
if,
but the
but it's
question
still a good
is,
game.
well, okay, then that's important. The thing is the Bayonetta that you got is it a good
is it a
game? And
good game?
if the answer is yes, then like that's good.
Yeah, yeah,
Performance issues aside, then as long as it's still a good game, I'm not trying to like give say Game Freak a pass here for putting out a game with bad technical issues, but I think there's just always going to be a balance with like how much shitty performance can you get away with, and I think you can see it with Square Enix, like the door is the bad door,
that door
and the game
was,
runs at 30 frames per second.
which I
But
never even cared about, which was something
I
that we
still
both
like,
talked about, right?
I still enjoyed FF7 a lot. It
Yeah,
is noticeable when you jump to it, but after like a little bit, you're like, this game is running fine as long as it's stable frame pacing. You're like, okay, I'm just playing this video game now, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, but is 30 frames noticeable? It is noticeable. Is it manageable? I guess the answer is it depends. But as long as it's locked at 30, then sure, it's probably, quite manageable.
Hmm.
I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast, so I might have not talked about it at all. But I've been playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 kind of recently, right?
Hmm.
All right, so I'm playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 on my PC. So I'm playing it at like roughly 120-ish frames per second or unlocked frame rate, right? Really high frame rate. There is a bug in that game that and it's terrible. But if you are running the game higher than 30 frames per second, the boss AI like gets too good and will break out of your combos constantly. So basically, it makes boss fighting impossible, like so damn hard because they'll never get stunned
The
because they'll
heck,
just like yeah.
they're
And
just
this is like a weird
accelerated, some weird accelerated point from the
yeah,
frame
it's like a
rate.
weird like AI logic problem where like if you're running the game harder than 30 frames, like the boss fights just get too damn hard because they just like don't get stun locked at all, and they'll just like they're
Wow.
so hard, so damn hard. So I was in a couple of boss fights playing at an unlocked frame rate where I'm like, I can't do this, man, I can't. So I had to lower my
That
frame limit to
that
30
happened.
to 30, and I got to tell you, man, going from like 120 to 30 not only is like noticeable, it's like it like gave me a headache. Like it is so
See,
hard to
that's the
like
weird thing. I
yeah.
can't I know like 60 FPS versus 30, but I can't recognize it that much because, unless it's like a fighting game or like an action, some sort of action game, right?
Yeah.
But I notice it now because I've been playing 100. I usually play on 120 now. It's just
Yeah.
in the camera when I rotate the camera. That's
When
when
you
I
rotate the
notice
camera.
like, okay, this is not what I want to be doing. That's
Oh
when I
man,
notice
yeah.
stuff.
So going from like the from really high to really low, it actually makes me feel physically sick because my it just hurts. It gives me an insane headache. It's not just the camera. It's also your animations. Like everything is like a quarter of what it's meant. It is a quarter, like 30 from 120. That's a quarter of the frames,
I'm
right? So
I'm glad you're surviving Pokemon. Just look at your
oh,
main character.
well, the thing about Pokemon is like
it
you turn on the Switch and you're already there, right?
You're
But just
already
jumping,
there. Yeah,
just jump. It
the
would be
jump.
like, oh man, it's so hard to play. But so what was my point? Oh, 30 is manageable if it's always 30 and always locked. But once you introduce any kind of
Like dips or yeah,
fluctuations,
yeah.
that's when it's bad.
That's when it's bad. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll this will be in until the next Pokemon game. So there'll be
Well,
something said
yeah,
about it.
we'll see, we'll see. I mean, everyone's giving Game Freak a hard time. I also want Game Freak to succeed. And this is gonna sound weird, but I personally actually I had way more fun with Arceus than I am with
No,
Scarlet Violet.
I think
Yeah,
that's been what I've seen on the internet, on Twitter. That's what I've heard as well. A lot of people are like Arceus over this one, but
I
there's
gave
other
Arceus
reasons
shit.
too.
Arceus looks like shit. Well, let's not sugarcoat it. It looks bad, but at the very least,
It does run.
I never
It
had
runs good.
that
Yeah.
too bad of performance issues with it. So yeah.
Oh man. Well.